I have someone who needs me. Haven't I provided for you enough? I need you to write me a divorce agreement with these terms.
My husband said this to me and handed me a divorce agreement. We had been together for 30 years, and yet he treated me this way. But my husband still hasn't realized that I won't just silently back down. I'm a 57-year-old housewife. It's been 32 years since I married my husband. We have a daughter named Layla. But even though we have a child, I never thought I would be married to my husband for so long. I met my husband at work. I met him at the company where I started working after graduating from vocational school. My husband had always had a somewhat eye-catching personality. I felt that right away when I joined the company. He's not extremely handsome or anything, but he seems attractive somehow. He was my trainer when I first joined. When we were together, it was a lot of fun, and I felt excited. I even used work-related questions as an excuse to invite him for drinks. That's how we gradually got closer, and he confessed his feelings to me, and we started dating. I was thrilled to be dating the person I admired, and from there, we dated for about 3 years. We even lived together, and I thought we could continue like this forever. Then he proposed, and we decided to get married. Our relationship had been smooth sailing, so there were no issues. When you date for such a long time, you naturally get to know each other's families. So when we went to announce our marriage, they accepted right away. His parents were easygoing, saying something like,
"Oh, that's no problem at all. Go ahead and get married."
They were such understanding in-laws that I never experienced any harassment after marriage. In fact, I got along very well with my mother-in-law. She had 2 sons, including my husband, but she had wanted a daughter, so she treated me like a real daughter. Because of that, I visited my in-laws regularly with my husband, and we built a very good relationship. I got along well with my in-laws, but my relationship with my husband was becoming increasingly distant over the years. That's because my husband held on to the old-fashioned belief that housework was the wife's responsibility, and that childcare was solely the mother's duty. I had been troubled by this. Before we had children, I was working a regular job too, so I started work at nearly the same time as my husband, and our return home times were also similar. Despite this, my husband never helped with household chores at all. Even if I asked him to help a little, he wouldn't listen at all.
"I'm tired from work. Isn't that the wife's job?"
He started saying such things suddenly after we got married, and I was taken aback. During our dating days, he was a gentleman who treated me kindly. So why did he change so suddenly? Well, maybe this is his true nature. Perhaps he concealed his true self when we were dating, believing that once we were married, he didn't need to provide anymore. I suppose that's what it's all about. I was quite shocked, but when we just got married, so I couldn't consider divorce right away. And I didn't want to part with my in-laws, with whom I had a good relationship. And at the time, the disillusioned part was just more noticeable. It wasn't that everything was completely wrong. On weekends, he would take me on drives, suggest going on trips together as a couple, and generally try to make time for us as husband and wife. The main issue was that he left all the housework to me. Well, that was the worst part. But I decided I couldn't expect a perfect marriage from the start, so I tried to accommodate him. I managed to balance work and household chores without overexerting myself. Fortunately, he never complained when I made pre-prepared meals, so that helped. With that, I thought we could somehow make our married life work, and I lived each day with that mindset. Then, around 3 years after we got married, I became pregnant with our daughter. It was my first pregnancy, so there were many things I wasn't sure about. But with the support of my mother-in-law and others, I had a safe childbirth, and we named our daughter Layla. Layla was incredibly cute, like an angel. My husband was also very happy when he saw Layla for the first time. However, my husband wasn't cooperative when it came to childcare. "Oh, can you change the diaper for a moment? I'm using the stove right now and can't let go."
Huh? I don't want to. It's smelly, and I don't really know how to do it. You're the mother. You should take responsibility.
But reluctantly, I paused my cooking and changed our daughter's diaper. However, our daughter started crying loudly, so I had to comfort her for a while. As a result, about 15 minutes had passed since I interrupted my cooking. The dish I had paused was still in the middle of preparation, so even if I resumed, it wouldn't turn out quite as I had intended. My husband complained about dinner being late. I've thought so many times, if that's the case, then you should have changed the diaper yourself. Again, it seemed like my husband didn't like that I prioritized our daughter.
Hey, haven't you cleaned the bath yet?
"Oh, I'm sorry. I haven't done it yet because I was fretting about Layla."
What's the matter? I wanted to take a bath since I sweated a lot.
"Well, you should have cleaned it yourself."
What did you say? That's all your job as a wife, isn't it?
Are you sure you even know how to clean the bath properly?
Don't make fun of me. I can clean the bathroom too, you know.
In this way, my husband would often pick arguments. However, he didn't actually know how to clean the bath, and he stood there frozen, not knowing what to do in the bathroom. "Oh? Maybe you really can't do it." When I laughed like that, my husband looked frustrated.
Of course. I can't do something I haven't been told.
"That's why I told you to do it. So are you willing to make an effort to learn?" It's pointless to keep telling someone who has no intention to learn, isn't it?
Well,
it seems that my husband finally realized he had made an unfair statement.
Well, my bad. But please don't neglect the household chores.
After saying this, my husband returned to his room. After that, he never actually did the chores himself, but it seemed like the frequency of his complaints decreased. Later on, our daughter continued to grow and eventually started walking and speaking. I was so happy when she ran up to me and said, "Mommy." She was so sweet and loving that I swore to protect her for the rest of my life. My husband used to be affectionate toward our daughter when she was younger, and I think he had some interest in parenting. In reality, most of the actual care was left to me. As our daughter continued to grow, she progressed through kindergarten and elementary school. She enjoyed her days and would tell me about her experiences at school. I had quit my job after giving birth, so I had spent a lot of time with her, making it easy for us to communicate. However, our daughter didn't open up much to my husband, and I believed it was because of him. When my husband returned from work, he often seemed grumpy, so meal times were usually silent. My daughter couldn't talk to him much either. But then, there were times when he was in a very good mood and talked excessively to our daughter, leaving her confused about how to respond. I raised my concerns to him about his inconsistent behavior. "Can you stop changing your attitude towards our child based on your mood? Try to be as kind as possible to our daughter. Otherwise, Layla won't know how to react." Upon hearing this, my husband opened his eyes wide and got angry.
Huh? Why should I have to adapt to you and her? I've been working hard to support your lives. How I choose to spend my time at home is my business.
My husband expressed his anger in this way. This argument might have been the biggest one we had since our daughter was born. My husband said this and stormed out of the house. Given my emotional state, I was relieved that he left the situation. He didn't come back home that day. The next day, it seemed he went to work from somewhere else, and he returned home a few days later in the evening. We barely spoke as a couple during that time. and I think it was about a week before we had a proper conversation. We didn't exactly reconcile, but I felt that I had been overly tense in front of our daughter. So I initiated the conversation, and he gradually started responding, and we began to talk normally again. After that, I didn't expect much from my husband. I focused on raising our daughter to be a good child. I took charge of keeping track of her school affairs, arranging for cram schools and private tutors when she wanted them. When money became tight, I took on part-time jobs to make ends meet. I took good care of her that way, and she grew up to be a very good girl. She managed to attend a prestigious high school and later secured a good job at a large company. My daughter, who was a little girl just a few days ago, is now a working adult. I really think that the time flies by so fast. When she started working, she moved out of our home and began living on her own. So, my husband and I were left with an empty nest. Despite everything that had happened before, I found myself becoming more forgiving, and there were considerably fewer arguments. I had been working part-time in an office job since our daughter entered high school, and recently, I've been offered a chance to become a full-time employee. I'm currently contemplating whether to accept it or not. It's a regular job with good conditions, and the salary would significantly improve. However, when I discussed it with my husband, he opposed the idea.
What about household chores and meals? I don't want it to be delayed again.
I will manage that properly.
No, it's still not okay. You can say anything with just words. Once you take on this role, it will be difficult to go back to being a part-timer. It's not like our life is difficult right now, so why not stay as a part-timer?
This is how my husband opposed my promotion to a full-time position. I could have argued back at this point, but it would have caused a lot of trouble. Well, my husband was right. Our life wasn't particularly challenging, so I thought it was fine. I apologized to the company for not accepting their offer and continued as a part-timer. A few years passed in the blink of an eye, and several years went by without any significant changes in our life together. We continued with the same routine day in and day out. In the midst of this, our daughter announced that she was getting married. It was quite a big piece of news, and both my husband and I were surprised. Her husband seemed like a wonderful and trustworthy person. We had a successful meeting between the two families, and the wedding was a beautiful event. Seeing our daughter so happy made me incredibly happy. Then, about 2 years later, our daughter announced that she was pregnant. I was incredibly surprised by the news and looked forward to becoming a grandmother. She had been working, but she wanted to take maternity leave early and return to her parents' home to prepare for the birth. However, when my husband heard this, his expression darkened slightly.
Is it okay for your husband to handle household chores and such?
Oh, it's perfectly fine. We both worked and shared household duties when we were living together. He can manage life on his own without any problems.
I see.
I felt like my husband was somewhat opposed to the idea of our daughter coming back home. Is there something wrong?
Huh? What do you mean?
Well, it just feels like you're opposing her decision to come back home for the childbirth.
No, it's not like that.
My husband was clearly flustered. In times like this, my husband is hiding something. It seems our daughter noticed it too. Is there something wrong?
I've told you there's nothing. Stop insisting.
My husband's expression turned sour.
Fine. Do whatever you want, including giving birth at your parents' place.
Eventually, he said this in a resigned manner. Whenever my husband's mood soured, he would react like this. But at this point, neither I nor my daughter cared. Responding to him every time was exhausting, so our daughter quickly packed her belongings and temporarily moved back to our house. During that time, I spent leisurely days cooking with her. In the midst of this, My daughter asked me about something. Did Dad use hair products and stuff? Huh? I noticed there are various items added to Dad's shelf in the bathroom, like these wipes to wipe off sweat. I've never seen him use anything like this before. Now that you mention it, you're right. I hadn't noticed until my daughter pointed out. I guess I was indifferent to it. Then, I thought that maybe the reason my husband didn't want our daughter to live with him was related to this. Maybe he's hiding something. Could it be that he didn't want you to find out about it, which is why he was hesitant about your return for the childbirth? It seems like it definitely related to women. Men, who aren't usually concerned about fashion and grooming, suddenly starting to care usually means something is up. Huh? But he's almost 60 now. Well, there are women who are interested in much older men, and with financial stability. There are women who would be interested in him too. I see. How about we confront him a bit? Huh? My daughter said that, and called my husband into the living room that evening.
What's this about? What do you want to talk about?
Dad, you're having an affair, right?
What? An affair?
Yeah, my classmate saw you.
Must be a mistake. Maybe your classmate confused me with someone else?
No, she said it was definitely you.
There are no photos or anything to support that claim.
Dad, why haven't you denied it even once since earlier?
Huh?
Normally, if you weren't having an affair, you would say I'm not having an affair, right? But Dad, your initial response was about how it might be a case of mistaken identity. That sounds like you're having an affair, but want to make sure it's not discovered. That's what that response suggests, right?
That's just a stretch.
I think it might be better to confess now while you have the chance. It might result in lower settlement fees, don't you think? When my daughter said that, my husband confessed.
I have someone who needs me.
I was surprised by his words. Wait, are you admitting it?
Yeah, I'm having an affair, but we truly love each other.
Dad, that's terrible. Betraying mom like this. My husband looked annoyed and said to me,
I've provided enough for you. I will pay alimony and property division. It adds up to about $53,000. Please write the divorce agreement with these terms. He said this and handed me a divorce agreement. I don't know when he prepared it. I guess he had it in his bag the whole time. Despite being together for 30 years, was he willing to treat me this way? But he still hadn't realized that I wouldn't just silently accept this. Fine, I will agree to the divorce. Is that so? Good. With this, I can be with her without any worries. To be honest, being with you, except for doing household chores, has been tiresome. I'm going to have fun with a younger woman in this house, so get out of here soon. My husband had a triumphant look on his face as he laughed. It seemed like he had completely forgotten about the incident, but that was better. I quickly wrote up the divorce agreement and submitted it. My husband went to his affair partner's place for a while and waited for us to move out. I immediately changed the locks on the house. About a week later, the intercom at home rang multiple times. Hello? Who is it? It's me. What the hell are you doing? Oh, is this a sales visit or some kind of prank? Please stop this. Don't mess with me. It's me. My husband was shouting angrily through the intercom. Beside him, there was a young woman. Why did you change the locks without permission and occupy the place? Get out of my house! My husband yelled like that. I calmly responded, You seem to have forgotten, but this house is in my name. Huh? Isn't this a house I inherited from my father when he passed away? How could you mistake it for your house? It seemed like he suddenly remembered, and his face turned pale. What the hell is going on? You told me you own a house in a prime location in New York.
We got married and now you're telling me. This is fraud. I'm breaking up with you, just an old man. The woman he was having an affair with said that angrily and left the scene. She had committed adultery herself, yet she was acting selfishly. Well, considering she got into such a relationship with a man about 40 years her senior, and even married him for money, she must have taken quite a hit. It's likely to become a dark chapter in her life. The husband, who was left behind, approached me, seeking help, feeling quite isolated.
Come on, let me in.
What? Why should I let a complete stranger into my house?
We were still a couple, right?
We are divorced now, so you're practically a stranger.
But we are parents to the same child, so we are still family, right?
Dad, please stop. I don't consider you my father anymore. Let's use this opportunity to cut ties.
Layla, please don't say such sad things.
For now, you've been lingering here for a while, and it's becoming bothersome. Could you please leave? Or should I call the police?
What? The police?
After hearing those words, my ex-husband hastily fled. At his age, getting into legal trouble would be disastrous, especially given the financial strain caused by property division and alimony. So he couldn't afford any additional expenses. After that, I hired a lawyer to claim compensation from my ex-husband and his affair partner. I ensured that their wages would be garnished if they failed to pay, so there shouldn't be any issues with receiving the payments. My ex-husband had already lost his home, and even his own brother had abandoned him, mainly because I had informed them about his affair beforehand. As a result, my ex-husband ended up living alone in a rundown old apartment. Currently, he seems to be experiencing loneliness while spending his days simply repaying his debts. On the other hand, I had a peaceful time during my stay at my parents' house, finally getting the chance to meet my long-awaited grandchild. Furthermore, my daughter and her husband purchased an apartment nearby to our family home. Now, we regularly meet with my daughter's family and grandchild, enjoying happy days together.
I got someone pregnant. I'm gonna remarry her and we'll live off mom's inheritance. So draft up those divorce papers and pack your bags.
Excuse me? This was the same husband who'd ghosted his sick mom. And now he has the nerve to show up? Clearly he's lost a few screws. He's such a coward and a total loser. But oh, how different things might be if he knew the whole story. That inheritance of yours? Well, it's quite the unique treasure. Take good care of what your mom left you. I'm Maya, hitting the big 5-0. I find myself talking to the TV even when I'm alone. Guess it's just one of those age things. Years back in my vibrant late 30s, I lived with my husband Ken and his mom Mary. Although Mary was technically still married to Ken's dad, Scott, they'd been doing the long-distance thing for years. Given Mary's health, Ken took charge of her medical visits and everyday stuff. That was until I came into the picture, and as a devoted housewife, I stepped up. Mary was a real gem. Our bond was the opposite of those cliché mother-in-law dramas. We were like two peas in a pod. But life took a turn when she had a stroke. Left paralyzed and speech impaired, her zest was gone. She became bedridden. My heart ached, but Ken? He was ice cold. Behind her back, he'd mutter,
Couldn't she have just passed on? This is gonna cost a fortune.
Harsh for his own mom, but that was his truth. His visits became scarce, and his apathy was jaw-dropping. When she got discharged, I was out of my depth, being a full-time housewife with zero caregiver chops. Even with limited trips outside, I had to run errands. When I suggested we split the caregiver duties, he's like,
Hold up. You want me to do what?
Seriously? She's your mom.
Look, I'm out working and you're here. Shouldn't you handle everything?
I'm not always home, you know. I do have to go get groceries and stuff. I was floored. I set him straight, and sensing he'd stepped over the line, he backpedaled.
Alright. Just tell me what to do.
This clear change in attitude irked me. Divorcing him crossed my mind, but I feared how Mary would be treated without me around. But his half-hearted attempts were a joke. He'd often skip the essentials, like changing her diapers, and conveniently escape on weekends, pretending it was for work. Yet he'd return, flaunting his so-called grocery runs that were more about his junk food cravings. Yep, I'd shackled myself to Mr. Worthless. I wished I could blame Mary and walk out, but ditching someone who truly cared for me? No can do. Stuck between duty and affection, that house felt more like a prison. Around the 3rd year of caring for Mary one late night, I was jolted awake by her sobs. I hurried to her side, and she tearfully said, "He left me behind." I tried to understand her through her distress. "He was on the phone, then he just said, 'See ya, Mom,' and walked out." Her speech, always difficult, became almost incomprehensible when she was upset. From what I pieced together after telling someone he'd be right there, my husband just left. Exhausted as I was from the daily grind, I kicked myself for not seeing the signs. "I wanted to go after him, but look at me. Even my own son left me. You might as well leave too, since we're not even related." She sobbed, her voice dripping with hurt and bitterness. We spent the night in each other's company trying to find solace. Come morning, I reached out to the police about my MIA husband. Their take? A grown man, probably stressed, just needed some space. I later found out he'd quit his job months ago and had been play acting the whole going to work thing. With no lead on his whereabouts and him blocking my calls, I considered getting a private investigator on board. But with personal computers still rare back then and no detective agencies around, I felt trapped. Mary's heart gave out under the weight of her son's abandonment, and she was gone within a year. I tried calling him from the hospital and the funeral parlor. He didn't even show for her service. His indifference cut deep. The very next day, as I pondered my next steps and the complexities of divorcing a ghost, the front door creaked open. My first thought? Break in. I grabbed a bat, ready to defend myself, but enstrolled my husband like he'd just popped out for a minute.
"I'm back,"
he said nonchalantly. My emotions whirled.
"What's up with a bat?"
"What on earth? Why now? Where have you been?" was all I managed to say.
"Heard about Mom. Got something to talk about, hence my return."
"What is it?"
"I've got someone pregnant. We want to live off Mom's inheritance, so give me a divorce and clear out,"
he said with a smirk. All I could do was laugh. "You're joking, right?"
"What's funny?"
"See, here's the thing. Mary's inheritance, this house included, is now mine. Got her will right here to prove it." He gaped.
"But I'm her son."
"And I've been her daughter. Blood ties or not. She always said she valued a caring heart over a son who'd leave her in the lurch."
"No way. Give me that will."
As he lunged, instinct took over, and I swung the bat. It connected. I swear I hadn't planned it. He rushed me, and it just happened. An unfortunate twist in an already twisted tale. Though what I did was painful for him, compared to Mary's suffering, it's just a scratch. To be frank, I could have taken another swing or two with that bat, and it would have still felt warranted. Oh, and heads up, I'm the beneficiary of the life insurance, so you're not getting any of that either.
"You're kidding,"
he gasped. Whether from the shock of the news or from his injury, I couldn't tell. Look, it's not that you won't inherit anything. It's just unique. And by the way, Scott passed away before Mary did. I didn't tell you since you were MIA.
"Wait, so there's some inheritance from Dad?" "Yes, that could cover the baby bills."
Sure, if you consider a dilapidated hoarder's palace an inheritance.
"Huh?"
I filled him in on Scott's legacy. Mary had long wanted to escape Scott's control, settling for living separately. Scott, on his own, was helpless. He lived off convenience store food, rarely took out the trash, and started hoarding everything from junkyards and beaches. His home became the talk of the town. It's an old mess of a house, rain pours in, and the floors are giving way. Lately, it's been leaning ominously due to a sinking foundation, prompting complaints to the city. He never dealt with it and died, leaving that disaster behind. Given no other relatives, and with Mary trusting me with all finances, Ken got lucky with his inheritance.
What the heck am I supposed to do with this?
You could refuse it, but either way, that mess is on you. Cleaning up will cost a fortune.
Why did I get stuck with this?
It seems like karma to me. Mary didn't despise you, by the way. She once said it's tough caregiving and blamed herself for being such a weight on you. He looked at me, a mixture of shock and realization. That will was made before Scott's passing. Mary, aware of our long caregiving journey, wanted me to financially set in case we broke up. She was clueless about Scott's house. It wasn't about revenge. It just happened. Tears welled in his eyes as he murmured,
Mom.
He confessed the gloom after Mary's stroke was suffocating. Overwhelmed by caregiver duties and daily pressures, he sought solace in an affair. He called it a misjudgment. He ditched his job and home, planning to dodge his pregnant mistress too. The tale was absurd. More shockingly, her dad was a mob boss. Facing her dad's formidable presence, he got pressured to marry her and bear all costs, from childbirth to relocation. Hence his hopes for Mary's inheritance.
So, now what?
He sighed. My reply was simple. Karma's a trip, isn't it? In the meantime, I'll wisely use Mary's inheritance. Also, let's get that divorce rolling. After I laid out the facts, Ken, trapped in a marriage with his subordinate, just nodded in agreement. We breezed through our divorce paperwork. Though I urged him to handle his decrepit inherited house, he did nada, even disclaiming that inheritance was too much trouble. But about 6 months in, a big storm partially brought down the hoarder's house. To make matters worse, the wreckage flew around, causing damage and injuries in the neighborhood. Predictably, he had to face damage claims. And since Scott's death, trash had piled up even more. The town had caught wind of this messy house, and locals took it as an invite, sneak dumping their unwanted junk. It basically became the unofficial town dump. They even found asbestos. And since no one could prove who brought it, Ken footed the bill. All in all, he owed a whopping $100,000 for trash removal, damage payouts, and my alimony. At first, his second marriage seemed smooth, but when his new wife found out about the house and his slackness in parenting, she was over it. A few years later, they split. She claimed emotional distress, which had him paying even more alimony and child support. I decided not to pursue her for funds, given her kind of scary family ties. I mean, crossing paths with a mob boss's daughter? Hard pass. Now, how do I know all this? Because get this, my shameless ex tried reconnecting, saying,
Let's start fresh. I need you.
I shot that down real quick. He probably thought I had some cash since I opened a little beauty salon. But the inheritance for Mary was my nest egg, and no way was I sharing it with him. He seemed desperate, but after my firm no, he vanished. As for me, I remarried a couple of years back. My guy's an old high school buddy. After losing his wife early and experiencing his own divorce, we reconnected at a reunion. It started with casual coffee chats, and before we knew it, we were ready for the long haul together. No kid pressures, no parent caretaking. It's a relaxed companionship. The pandemic really spotlighted the value of close bonds, nudging us towards marriage. Even with the whirlwind of my younger years filled with caregiving and work, life still got a lot left to offer. I'm holding on to a hopeful vision of even happier days ahead, and I'm eager to enjoy each one of them with my hubby by my side.
Hey, what are you doing? Instead of playing around, make some food, you good-for-nothing wife.
Up until now, my husband has been acting like the boss and making me do his bidding during the early stages of my pregnancy. He finally went so far as to hurl insults at me during my remote meeting and even threw a bucket of water at me. I turned around, soaking wet, and there stood my satisfied husband.
What's your problem? You should say that kind of thing after fulfilling your wife's duties, you know? Come on, hurry up with a meal.
I had reached my limit at this point. I couldn't stand having a husband who not only bossed me around, but also threw water at his pregnant wife. Before I could protest to my husband, I grinned and said this. "Oh, well, my condolences to you. My name is Harper, a 32-year-old working wife. I am an only child, so my immediate family consisted only of my parents, who lovingly raised me by themselves. My extended family also cherished me, especially my maternal uncle, Joseph, who is single and treated me like his own daughter. My uncle held a high position as an executive at a major confectionery company, Candy Creations, and he often gave me the sweets they produced."
This is a candy that your uncle helped create when he was young.
As he said that with a smile, my respect for my uncle grew. Gradually, my dream became working for the same company as my uncle. I wanted to plan memorable sweets that would leave a lasting impression on people. During my time in college, I applied to Candy Creations as my top choice and successfully secured an offer. I had kept my family connection a secret, so it was by no means a case of nepotism. My uncle was also pleased with my decision to join the company. However, to avoid any trouble in the future, we had decided to keep our family connection secret within the company. After joining the company, I worked diligently, but I became so engrossed in my work that I didn't have a boyfriend until my late 20s. Despite my uncle and parents' recommendations for matchmaking, I declined and decided to find a partner on my own. I registered with a marriage consultation agency and met several men. But I couldn't find anyone who truly clicked with me, and I was on the verge of giving up. It was at that time that I finally met Elijah, who would later become my husband. Elijah was a salaried employee at a major advertising company, Dynamic Ads. He had a great appearance, and my first impression of him was flawless. Initially, I only revealed that I worked for a confectionery manufacturer, keeping my connections to Candy Creations a secret. In that situation, Elijah said to me,
Do you work at a confectionery manufacturer? I absolutely love sweets, you know. I'm particularly fond of Candy Creations gummies. I always have them.
He then showed me a pack of gummies from his bag. Those gummies were the first product I had been involved in planning after joining the company. I genuinely felt delighted by Elijah's words. Actually, this is a snack I was involved in planning, so I'm happy you like it.
Oh, really? That's quite a coincidence.
And so this is how my relationship with Elijah began. Due to our mature ages, after 1 year of dating, I received a proposal from Elijah. I happily accepted it. After introducing each other to our parents, we decided to have a wedding with only close relatives and friends. Dressed in a wedding gown, I was at the peak of happiness. On the wedding day, my uncle had tears in his eyes as he blessed us. He came to us and expressed words of celebration, and I responded with a smile. However, after my uncle had left, Elijah whispered something to me.
Hey, is that uncle of yours perhaps a big shot from Candy Creations?
Huh? Why do you say that?
I've seen him at a competition before. We lost that time, though.
Is that so?
Harper, isn't it a bit fishy? If Candy Creations executive is a relative of yours, you could have told us. Could it be that he got hired through connections?
I quickly denied it. I've been keeping the fact that he's a relative a secret. Despite conveying this, Elijah smirked.
I see. But your uncle seemed quite fond of you, didn't he?
Yes, he had been kind to me since I was a child. Another participant approached us, so the conversation ended there. However, Elijah was strangely in a good mood afterward. I had a bad feeling at that moment. Later, Elijah and I moved to a rented apartment, starting a new life. But it was there that I faced a certain problem. By the way, I work in the planning department, so I often have to work overtime, and it's a demanding job. Elijah was aware that I was reasonably busy, so before we got married, we made an agreement to share household chores. However, Elijah didn't do any housework at all. When he came home, he would just laze around. Furthermore, he would rush me to prepare meals. Of course, he didn't even bother to clear the dishes after eating. At first, I tried to manage everything by myself, thinking that I had become his wife. However, after living like that for several months, the stress began to build up. One day, I decided to have a frank discussion with Elijah. Hey, Elijah, could you help out with household chores a bit? However, my husband responded with apparent reluctance.
What are you talking about? Once we're married, isn't housework the wife's job?
That's not the case at all. We both agreed to share it before we got married, right? We're both working after all.
Did we really make such an agreement? Anyway, I don't feel like doing housework. You should do the housework, properly, as your duty as a wife.
I was stunned by those words and couldn't say anything in response. Since then, Elijah became increasingly domineering.
Get this suit dry cleaned. We're running low on socks. Make sure to buy some by tomorrow.
He started bossing me around with commanding tones, and eventually,
a wife should obey her husband. You lack respect for me.
He even started finding fault with me. After a year of living like that after marriage, I was exhausted. Then, at that time, I had been feeling unwell for a while, so I went to the hospital where I found out I was pregnant. It was still in the early stages, but joy welled up in my heart. I immediately returned home to share the news with Elijah. Elijah, it looks like I'm pregnant.
Oh, really? Well, that's good.
I felt somewhat let down by his rather indifferent response. For some reason, Elijah was in a good mood and even humming a tune. Did something good happen? You seem unusually cheerful. When I asked this, Elijah's eyes lit up and he said,
Actually, we just secured a contract with Candy Creations, so now your company is a client.
Huh?
This time, Candy Creations is going to release snacks for pregnant women. Our company is going to handle that PR entirely, and we've got plenty of budget. Lucky us.
That was certainly a project being carried out by a different team from mine. I hurriedly explained. I can't believe it, but did you say something to Uncle Elijah?
Huh? I just greeted everyone in the presentation, that's all.
What? If you do that, people around you will find out.
It's not a big deal, right? We got the contract because of it. I used our relationship and the directors to our advantage, but it's all part of the job. With this, my evaluation at Dynamics Ads is secure.
Saying that, Elijah whistled while loosening his tie. When I called my uncle and asked about it, he told me with a wry smile.
When people found out that Elijah was a relative of mine, they became very attentive. I told them that choosing the advertising agency should be unrelated to that.
Uncle, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Elijah's company will surely do good work. Harper, you don't need to worry.
My uncle said that, but I was dissatisfied with my husband's behavior.
By the way, how have things been lately? Are you getting along well with Elijah?
My uncle asked me that, but I couldn't say he was acting like a dictator, so I just told him that I was pregnant. He was very happy and told me to take care of my health, then he hung up. I had planned to continue working, but my morning sickness was worse than I had imagined. I couldn't stay on my feet because of the nausea, and I was constantly going back and forth between the bedroom and the bathroom. It was impossible for me to go to the office in that condition, and with the advice from those around me, I decided to take a 1-month leave until my morning sickness improved. Candy Creations was a company that was understanding of employees' pregnancies and childbirth, so my request for leave was quickly approved. When I informed Elijah about my leave, he showed reluctance. When I informed him about my morning sickness, he also expressed disapproval.
Huh? I've never heard of taking a leave for morning sickness or something like that.
It can't be helped. My health is really bad right now.
Pregnancy and childbirth aren't illnesses, you know? Taking leave for just morning sickness? You're not being a responsible professional, are you?
Even if you say that. In frustration, I bit my lip, and Elijah continued.
Well, whatever. Since you're staying at home, make sure to take care of all the housework perfectly, okay?
Huh? That's why I can't even stand up because of the morning sickness. Can't you understand?
Don't be so dependent. If you're not working, don't rely on me for everything. If you don't do the household chores, it won't end well for you.
His words were so harsh that I felt dizzy. As he had declared, Elijah demanded perfect housekeeping from me, even though I was struggling with morning sickness. For example, I would feel nauseous at the smell of pasta boiling, so I had resorted to using frozen pasta. However, Elijah quickly noticed it and harshly criticized me.
Hey, what is this? You're feeding me frozen pasta.
Elijah, you used to eat it without any complaints.
You're supposed to be a homemaker and you can't even make pasta? Are you really that useless?
He continued to criticize my household chores and make sarcastic comments, all the while refusing to help with them. I struggled to cope with morning sickness, but still tried to fulfill my husband's demands by doing the housework. Around 3 weeks into my leave, something unexpected happened. I received a sudden call from the company.
I am well aware that you are on leave, but I would like you to attend the remote meeting this coming Saturday.
I heard the details of that meeting and agreed without hesitation. On the Saturday morning in question, Elijah was still asleep, so I sat in front of the computer in the study and joined the remote meeting. I was feeling better that day, with my morning sickness under control. I participated in the remote meeting, offering my opinions and taking notes on the meeting content. Just as I was speaking, the study door behind me creaked open.
Hey, what are you doing? Instead of playing around, make some food, you good-for-nothing wife.
Then he splashed a bucket of water on me from behind. When I turned around, there was Elijah standing there with a satisfied expression.
What's your problem? You should say such things after fulfilling your wife's duties, you know? Come on, hurry up with a meal.
I had reached my limit at this point. Having a husband who not only bossed me around but also threw water at his pregnant wife was unbearable. Before protesting to Elijah, I grinned and said, "Oh, well, condolences to you."
Huh? What the hell are you talking about?
Elijah furrowed his brow. I slid my chair and adjusted the computer screen of the remote meeting to make it visible to him.
Why?
Elijah's face gradually turned pale. On the screen were my husband's company's advertising team, along with the representatives from Candy Creations, including my uncle. There were looks of astonishment, disgust, and anger, especially on my uncle's face. I was in the middle of a remote meeting.
Huh? Why are you participating while on leave?
Well, you know, you secured this project for advertising targeting pregnant women, right? I was asked to participate because they wanted to hear from a pregnant employee.
That can't be...
Then my uncle at the back of the screen addressed me.
Harper, are you okay? Since you were splashed with water, shouldn't you go to the hospital?
The remote meeting participants expressed concern for me, one after another. Uncle, I'm fine. Thank you, everyone. Upon my response, my uncle says sternly,
Now, everyone from Dynamic Ads, is he the sales representative from your company who handled this project? Yes, he is from our company.
As the manager of Dynamic Ads answered with a trembling voice, my uncle continued.
The Dynamic Ads developed this product with the intention of caring for pregnant women. But for the person responsible to behave so outrageously towards his pregnant wife, frankly, we've lost trust in your company. Wait, Executive Director!
Despite the manager of Dynamics Ads' frantic attempts to stop him, my uncle continued coldly.
Personally, I'm inclined to terminate the contract altogether. We will reconsider it internally and get back to you, so please wait for a while.
One by one, my uncle and the representatives from Candy Creations exited the remote meeting. The only ones left were the members of Dynamic Ads, where my husband worked.
Elijah, what have you done? We're about to lose a major contract. No, even before that, is such behavior even acceptable as a human being?
Chastised by the manager, my husband answered with a pale face.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. Do you always treat your wife like this? Huh? Is that the case? Well...
When Elijah choked on his words, the female advertising designer from Dynamic Ads, who was present, spoke up. He poured water on his pregnant wife and asked her to make dinner. That's truly unbelievable. Starting with her comment, the attendees from Dynamic Ads criticized him one by one, saying things like, "This is terrible," and "So Elijah was like this."
Wait, everyone, it's a misunderstanding.
As Elijah desperately shouted, the members of Dynamic Ads continued to leave the remote meeting one by one. Soon there was no one left on the conference screen. My husband knelt on the floor, bowing his head in despair. Just then, the intercom rang. When I answered it, my uncle was standing there.
I came because I was worried. Are you really okay physically?
I was still soaked, but I nodded in response to my uncle's words. Then my husband rushed out of the study and prostrated himself in front of my uncle.
Executive Director, I am truly sorry for the trouble I have caused you. Please, just spare us the contract termination.
However, my uncle looked down at Elijah and said,
Isn't the person you should be apologizing to someone else? Oh.
Until that moment, Elijah had likely not considered me much. He turned pale, and when he looked at me, he desperately clung to me.
Harper, I'm truly sorry. Please, forgive me. Can you say something to the executive for me?
I forcefully pushed Elijah away. Don't play around. You've treated me poorly both before and during pregnancy. Marrying you was a mistake in itself. I've already decided to get a divorce.
What? Divorce? Harper, you can't be serious.
Saying that household chores are a wife's duty? That way of thinking is completely outdated. We're both working, so where's the logic in not sharing household responsibilities? Is your mind like an outdated, rusty computer that refuses to update?
Harper...
Be prepared, you worthless man, because I'm going to claim alimony and child support. When I spat out those words, Elijah burst into tears, his face covered in tears and snot. My uncle sighed and took me away from the scene. That's how I returned to the safety of my family home. Later, Elijah and I divorced. As a substitute for alimony, I received all of our shared savings. We settled things with a lump sum payment for child support. Afterward, Candy Creations terminated its contract with Dynamic Ads. Elijah was forced to take responsibility and was moved from the flowery sales department to a less cushy position. Elijah's wrongdoings were already widely known at Dynamic Ads. Unable to bear the hushed whispers and rumors, Elijah chose to resign voluntarily. It seems he ended up unemployed. Since he made a lump sum payment for child support and had no savings, he now lives in a rundown apartment and is desperately searching for a new job. Even hearing that, I have no sympathy whatsoever. I can only hope he reflects on his actions. As for me, I recently gave birth to an adorable little girl. Both my parents and my uncle are overjoyed, and my daughter is thriving with the love and care of those around her. I've returned to work, and I'm juggling between my job and raising my child every day. From now on, I want to look forward to my life with enthusiasm, enjoying my daughter's growth.